Welcome, everybody. Go ahead and have a seat. Make sure you sit in the correct seat, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right. So, yesterday we examined the Wallace line, where we looked at the different organisms across the Malay archipelago, that where he had discovered them, and between overlapping other great scientists and naturalists' observations, between Wallace is able to come to the same ideas that Charles Darwin was, that species change over time. And not just that, but that the mechanism was a pressure that existed in nature. All right, so we're going to be examining this pressure. It's called natural selection. There are some other mechanisms of evolution that we'll get into more later, but we're gonna remember your essay topic at the end of this unit, document 19. It's about the tenets of natural selection. And there's three organisms we're going to examine. The first is the rock pocket mice. We do that today. After that, we'll spend some time talking about finch on the Galapagos Islands, and then we'll examine the Venezuelan guppies. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the rock pocket mice. So today's schedule, we're going to be going through these, spending a few minutes with these sorting cards. We've got a little 10-minute video to watch about these rock pocket mice. Then you guys have some questions to answer, some data to graph, and then a couple more questions to answer. So first thing we're going to do is examine these cards. So you've got a black and white copy there in front of you in your packet. All right, just as I have them here in front of me, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to look at these and sort of put them in order. Right now, they're in a random order, but these go in a specific order. All right. So what I'm going to do is just set a timer. The cards are randomly ordered here as 4, 1, 2, 3. There is a specific sequence, and it is not 1, 2, 3, 4. What I'd like you to do is just, well, essentially what we have here are two locations. You have location A and you have location B. And at these two different locations, there is a certain population of what are called rock pocket mice. These tiny little mice that can be brownish, dark brown, or they can be light sandy colored. Anyway, that's enough detail. I'm going to leave this projected here for you. And what I'd like you guys to do is examine these and predict what order you think they go in. I'll go ahead and set a timer and give you guys 3 minutes to communicate with a shoulder partner, someone near you, about what order you think they should be in. You guys have a minute and a half left. Now, as we come up on a minute left for you guys to discuss it, also be prepared to justify why you're putting them in this order. 1 minute remaining. All right, with 30 seconds left, I encourage you guys to jot your numbers down. Right. So let's go over these together. So some of you looked at them and probably looked at coloration of mice, and you looked at uh, ascending or descending numbers, or you might have looked at the environments. But the thing I'd like you to look at is the background, the environment. These mice are in a desert, in a very sandy desert. And then here, this environment is much, much darker. It's called a lava flow. We'll get into that more in a bit. But what we have essentially is an environment in both location A and B that are the same. All right, they're the same. And you've got sand in both environments, and you have a population of light colored mice. And in that mice population are a couple dark ones. Well, some event occurs that changes one of those events. A volcanic eruption where now the environment is dark where before it was light. You'll notice here that the environment at location A is the same, but the environment has changed here. So what we have, or what would you then expect to happen? So what comes next is card 3. The number of lightly colored mice is decreasing as as the lighter ones vanish and dark numbers increase. And you can see this one stays relatively the same. We're going to examine the mechanism of this in terms of how this happens and frequencies and populations. So what we're going to do is start off with first, you guys taking a few moments to write, to justify right here in your packet on this page. It's titled Color Variations Over Time in Rock Pocket Mice Population. I'd like you to take a moment to then go ahead and explain how you decided on the order that you put them in. All right. I'll go ahead and give you guys 2 minutes to write that, and then we'll move ahead. One minute left. All right, so let's go ahead and dig in.
Across the American Southwest, golden deserts dotted by cacti and brush stretch for miles. Yet here in New Mexico's Valley of Fire, the landscape changes dramatically. Patches of black rock interrupt the sand, remnants of volcanic eruptions that occurred about 1,000 years ago. The eruption spewed a river of lava more than 40 miles long across the desert. As the molten rock cooled, it darkened, leaving any creature dependent upon camouflage in serious trouble. In the complex battle of life, one of the constant struggles is between seeing and not being seen, the evolutionary game of hide and seek. And we've come here to the Valley of Fire in New Mexico, a battlefield, to find one of the tiniest soldiers and what it can teach us about how evolution works. On the desert sands, the rock pocket mouse blends in perfectly, its light-colored fur concealing it from predators. But on dark lava, the same fur makes the mouse stand out, attracting the many creatures that see it as food.
These mice are the Snickers bar of the desert. They're eaten by foxes and coyotes and rattlesnakes, and certainly by owls, and maybe even occasionally hawks. And most of those predators are visual predators.
So what happened to the pocket mice that found themselves on this new terrain? When I accompany biologist Michael Nachman onto the lava, it doesn't take long to find out.
Oh, this one's closed.
Nachman has been collecting mice unharmed in traps. And it's a dark one.
It is, yeah.
Now, are most of the ones you find up here dark?
Almost all of them.
Not only have the mice here evolved to be as dark as the rock,
Shake them into the bag.
the color change has occurred precisely where it will conceal them from hunters. A bit of a white underbelly, too.
That's right. All of the dark ones here and on other lava flows have a white underbelly, and presumably there's no selection for dark on the belly because predators are coming from above.
Left to themselves, the mice show no preference for light or dark rocks. It's the predators that have made the difference.
The change in color over evolutionary time in the population is driven by predators weeding out the mice that don't match their background.
But how did the dark mice arise in the first place?
When a black mouse appears in a light population of mice, that is usually going to be due to a new mutation. And those are random and rare events.
To fully understand the pocket mouse transformation, Nachman moves from the lava to the lab. He and his team extract DNA from light and dark mice taken from one desert region. The aim? To find one or more genetic mutations that cause dark coloration. A mutation is a change in the chemical letters that make up our genes. It's a copying error that may occur when our cells divide. Mutation seems to mean that something bad has happened. Well, mutations are neither good or bad. Whether they are favored or whether they are rejected or whether they're just neutral depends upon the conditions an organism finds itself. So for the pocket mouse, a mutation that caused a mouse to turn black, that is good if you're living on black rock. It's bad if you're living out in the sandy desert.
The light mice are all on the bottom, here.
Fur color is a trait controlled by many genes. To figure out how dark mice evolved, Nachman focuses on how these genes differ in dark and light mice. One by one, the genes prove identical, but at last, something does turn up. The difference between dark and light mice boils down to a difference of 4 chemical letters in a gene called MC1R. Because the gene controls the amount of dark pigment in a mouse's hair follicles, a mouse with these mutations grows dark fur, which gives it an advantage on a dark background. But still, that's one mouse. How would its dark fur spread to a whole population?
This lava flow is about 1,000 years old. And so you might wonder, has there been enough time? It's only been 1,000 years. It's a very short period of time for a new mutation to come along and spread, and so that all of the mice on this lava flow are black, because really they all are.
Indeed, such a rapid spread of a mutation may seem unlikely until you do the math. And the reason is that while only one new mouse born in 100,000 may be black, hundreds of thousands of mice are born in any given year. And then those mice that are black have enough advantage that their babies do better, and they have more offspring, and their offspring have more offspring. And just about a 5% advantage, compounded year in and year out, can very quickly turn the whole population black, as we see today. If dark color gives mice a 1% competitive advantage, and you start with 1% of the population being dark, then about 1,000 years, 95% of the mice will be dark. If instead, the dark color gives them a 10% advantage, then it only takes 100 years. Thanks to Nachman's mice, science has an example of evolution crystal clear in every detail.
What's exciting about this is that we have a system that's very simple ecologically. You have dark rocks and you have light rocks, and you have dark mice and light mice. It couldn't be simpler.
We know who the predators are, what the selective force is. We know precisely the genetic basis of what makes the mice have an advantage or a disadvantage depending upon where they live. All the pieces are finally together. It's a perfect illustration of Darwin's process of natural selection. In fact, it's more than that, for Nachman's mice also counter a common misconception that evolution is a random process. Well, there is one random component, and that's the process of mutation. Mutations occur at random throughout our DNA. Every new organism is born with a new set of mutations. But while mutation is random, natural selection is not. Natural selection sorts out the winners and losers, and that's really what the whole process of evolution is driven by. But if natural selection is not random, would it produce the same result under the same conditions? It does. And here's proof. Rock pocket mice collected by Nachman from other lava flows in other parts of the Southwest.
These are two different black mice, and they each evolved on different lava flows, and the lava flows are hundreds of miles apart, but the changes, the genetic changes that made these mice black, were different in each case. And what's amazing to me is how similar the black mice are. We didn't know when we started this whether we would find that there were the same genes or different genes, and we were really surprised to find that they were completely different genes, and yet if you look at the mice, they look almost identical.
Clearly, there are different genetic ways to make a mouse dark. But once the beneficial mutations appear, natural selection, the non-random part of evolution, can, under very similar conditions, favor very similar adaptations.
In effect, each of these lava flows is like rewinding the tape of life and allowing evolution to occur again and again. And in each case, we find the dark mice have evolved.
The rock pocket mice show us that evolution can and does repeat itself, and why evolutionary change is never ending. As environments transform, so must the species that inhabit them, adapting and readapting in the great and complex battle of life.
All right, so let's run through some questions about this. So about these pocket mice, why? These are some of the video questions that go along with the video. So just reflect on the video, and I've got some of the discussion points up here. Just why do the pocket mice in the dark lava environment, why do they have white underbellies? We find this all over the animal kingdom, a lot of organisms with lighter underbellies. There hasn't been a selective pressure against the lighter underbelly to eliminate it from that population. When you think about the predators that exist for these mice, they're very visual predators, and they're from above. Hawks and different things, they're hunting them from above. Even for snakes, because that mouse has such short legs, the belly being white hair, there's no selective advantage or disadvantage for it. So it just randomly exists in that population, and nothing has been there to drive it out. Now, in regards to the back of the mouse, the mice in the darker environment with the darker fur, they'll have better camouflage, where the ones with lighter fur color in the darker environment have less, they don't blend in. So they are selected against. But when those lighter colored mice go out into the sand, Suddenly the selective advantage is theirs, and now the disadvantage goes to the dark colored mice out in the light environment. So is a mutation good or bad? It depends on whether it helps or hurts the organism. What drives the differences in the mice? The difference in the fur color, it's driven by natural selection. And what is doing the selection here? It's the predator. Now, if you remember back with Lamarck's idea was that an organism wants to change, so it will. So if you were a light colored mouse in a dark environment, you would probably want to be dark. Does the mouse's hair magically turn dark? No, it doesn't. If that mouse doesn't make it to light sand and it stays in that dark environment, it's at a selective disadvantage because predators can spot it easier. It doesn't mean that it won't mate with other mice. The mice don't pay attention to that at all. They reproduce with who's around, and on the dark lava flow, typically who's around are other dark colored mice. Now we have the same trend out in the light sandy desert. Who's typically out there? Lighter colored mice. Not because they're choosing to be in that environment. It's just that the darker ones are picked off more regularly by predators. They're easier to see. Understand the directionality of these words: selected for, selected against, selective pressures, selective advantage, selective disadvantage. How does a dark mouse appear in a population of light mice? It's from a genetic mutation, right? Because of a mutation in a particular gene. Remember that a gene is the directions for one protein. The MCR1 gene is a melanic. It's a gene that codes for color of brown. It's a melanic version, a brown version. What is a mutation? A mutation is a random change in that organism's DNA sequence. In every generation, there's new mutations. Are mutations bad? It just depends. Remember, whether it helps or hurts the organism in that environment. What does the MCR1 gene do? So when there are mutations in this particular gene, it controls the pigmentation that the mouse's hair follicle produces. So with it being that sandy color with this slight mutation, the shape of the protein is slightly different, the light that it reflects is different, and then it appears dark brown. So this mutation, or a mutation in that gene. Now remember that a gene is a long chain, or is the directions for a protein, and a protein is a long chain of amino acids. If that change in the DNA is enough to switch out one or some of those amino acids to be different ones, the shape of the protein is different. Remember that shape determines function. So it'd have a different shape, and then you could have a different phenotype. In this case, instead of tan hair, you've got dark brown hair. So how do you get a population of dark colored mice from, say, a light colored population? So once you have that mutation that exists in that population, even if that environment stayed sandy, which it would have for a really long time, you would need some catastrophic geologic event like a lava flow or something. Well, that mutation occurs in the population, and any of those mice that happen to be born, even if it's rare, in that dark sandy, in that light sandy environment, they would all be selected against. But in a dark environment, they would have that slight selective advantage. They would be more likely to live longer. So they would be more likely to reproduce and have offspring that are also dark. Even if that trait is recessive and it doesn't show up that often, it would have an advantage so that they would be more likely to live a little longer and have more offspring. It's not that the brown mice don't get eaten. It's just that they're less likely. They're able to hide better in that environment. So evolution can happen very quickly, and just a small advantage can lead to a very fast, what's called an allele frequency change, or how often we see that gene in that population. With these events that are selecting against those particular lightly colored mice, Who survives are the dark ones. The dark ones have offspring, and just in a few generations, you end up with a dark population. Did the mice on each of the dark lava flows, did they have the same mutation? Remember what they said, they did not. Now, it's the same gene that was mutated, but it was a different nucleotide change that had happened. There are substitutions that occurred, and we'll examine those more in the coming days, but different lava flows and what. But that because of different mutations causing a change in the amino acid sequence, the protein that's produced of that hair causes the color to be brown. And is evolution random? Evolution is not a random process. Remember that mutation is random, but evolution is not. It is very directional and specific. Natural selection is definitely not random. So where does that leave us? All right. So what you guys now need to do with these cards that you have set up in the correct order is you guys now need to record the data. All right. You need to record how many mice are in each of these segments. All right. So where this says first, second, third, fourth, this means the first meaning the oldest back in time, where fourth is the most recent in time. That's the order we have here, 2, 4, 3, 1. You can go ahead and write those numbers here, 2, 4, 3, 1. At location A here at time 2, the longest time ago, the oldest time, how many mice are light fur and how many of them are dark? So when you look closely at it, it's easy to see the dark. There's 2 here for the dark. How many are there for light? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we'd have 10 light colored mice and 2 dark colored mice. All right. And then later in time, what is the frequency we now observe there? Now, I'll give you guys a hint. There are 12 mice in each box. So if you see 1, that means there's 11 of the other. All right, and then the third one, since there are 2 dark colored mice, that means there must be 10 of the other. And here there's 1 dark colored mice, which means there's 11 of the other. All right, so next what you guys need to do is count up what you see here in the dark lava flow. Now you guys have those papers. I'll click through these quickly and move along to the next part of the assignment. So on document 9, there is a graph where you guys wrote your explanation as to why you put them in that order. This graph is here for you guys to graph location A and location B of all 4 time periods. All right, so I'm essentially showing you the answer. This is what you guys are going to need to reproduce here, and then you want to spend some time and answer these 4 questions. The remainder of the period is yours to graph. If the sub wants to pause this to help you guys, they can. But I think you guys can handle it. You're making bar graphs. All right, guys, hope this helps. And tomorrow we're going to spend some more with the genetics. All right, hope you guys have a good day.